I didn't realize I was pitching a fifth episode when I pitched this one.
Can I say that so Greg and I watched this movie together, and he was just like, okay, so how much background research did you do? And I was like, oh no, we're trying to fix this movie. And he's like, this is a fifth episode. What are you talking about? And I was like, oh my God, Greg. And
So
then I was like paranoid because I was like, oh my God, is it a fifth episode? And I wasn't paying attention.
It would make our
And
lives
then-
easier.
Like, no. This would have told me. But I was like panicked for half a second. Because I was like, we didn't do the background information for this to be a fifth episode. I don't know if everyone shit their pants on this one. I don't know.
Welcome to Certain POV's Another Pass podcast with Case and Sam, where we take another look at movies that we find fascinating but flawed. Let's see how we could have fixed them.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Sam Alisea.
Hi.
And today, we are doubling down on action movies today. We are talking about the 1991 action movie starring Jean Claude Van Damme and Jean Claude Van Damme, Double Impact. And to have that conversation, we are joined by Adam Garman.
hi, I'm Adam. First time caller, long time listener.
Adam, It is so great to have you on.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it was fantastic. Actually, we actually got to hang out in person at Sam's wedding and got to talking about doing a podcast. So that was really fun.
Weddings, not just for celebrating the bride and groom, also for networking.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And so you suggested that we talk about Double Impact, which is a movie I hadn't seen before, although I'd heard of it. It's a Jean Claude Van Damme movie where he plays himself and his brother. You know, it's fairly. It's like one of those movies where it doesn't take much to explain, you remember the log line pretty clearly.
Yeah. The tagline to this movie was "One packs a piece, the other one packs a punch."
That's yep, that'll cover it. I've heard it described, and I cannot find any sources on this one that actually officially ties this, but I've heard it described as being the superior film adaptation to Double Dragon, and that it's almost that. And so I watched this movie with that framework in my head, and we've covered the Double Dragon movie on the show, and it's a worse movie than this for sure. And so that kind of put me in a pretty good spot. I really liked this movie. I have quibbles. I was worried at the beginning, but you know what? I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was very fun. And my biggest note, and the spoilers for my pitch, would be the only thing that could make it better, honestly, is if it was just a video game. Because it is just Double Dragon.
Looking at it through that lens, all of a sudden I have to rethink all of my critique of this movie.
There are certainly quibbles, and there's certainly I'm really curious about the notes on this all, because I started off this movie and I was like, what did I sign on for in this thing? Because it opens with a very abrupt kind of opening tagline or title crawl, pardon me, and then the opening sequence, while badass, is campy as all hell. And then when we actually get Jean Claude Van Damme, man, he's trying real hard, but he is swimming upstream when it comes to his actual acting performances in this movie. So much so that they just wrote around his accent for
I love that.
but two characters.
I love it so much. I love that they drop one baby off at an orphanage run by French nuns to explain the French accent. And I love that when we get to America, and he is in America, I mean, he's in California, he is in spandex teaching an aerobics class, well, kind of teaching an aerobics class. And you think that he should be All-American, but then you find out that the All-American that grabbed him for some reason raised him in France. And I love it. I love it. I adore that about this movie, that they were like, well, how do we explain his accent? He's never going to be able to do it. It's okay. He raised him in France for some reason and then moved to LA.
And yet not a single one of them picked up any of the local accents of LA, of Hong Kong. Like, it's all just straight French.
Yep. That Brussels accent has a lot of muscles. I will say that is the biggest area where this movie kind of is at odds, which is that Van Damme, who is doing a very good job, and for like the dual compositing that they do in this movie and the trickery that they do for this is actually a very good job. And I think that Van Damme does a good job of having the two characters be very distinctly different, and like there's never a point where I'm confused, even in the spots where they're like made up to be, to look like each other in this whole thing.
Yeah, you always know who's Chad and who's Alex.
Yeah,
unless you're my husband, he couldn't figure out who was whoever.
I mean, like the choice of names is its own choice, Chad. But
Chad was the worst, guys. Can we talk about Chad and him being the worst? Like, he was like honestly the weakest link of this team, and so many times I was like, oh, Chad, you're just terrible. And I totally understand why Alex was frustrated with him, although Alex's jealousy at the end was ridiculous. So I guess they all have bad points. But seriously, Chad messed a lot of stuff up in the very beginning, and irresponsible, Chad. Irresponsible.
Did it feel like Chad was the one that should have been raised off on his own, and then Alex and Frank were the ones that had like the bond as if they had like been brought up together? Like Frank, badass, like just crazy super soldier who like guns down like armies and is just like this incredible like man at arms to train and bring up someone. You would imagine it would be a Sarah Connors kind of situation in like Terminator 2.
Right, especially because he's like basically hell-bent on revenge. Because let's be honest, okay? He comes in hot, no plans, zero plans for how he's legally going to help these boys regain their property, like regain their rights.
Oh, that still is sitting
a revenge film,
right? Oh, that
right?
Is still sitting in like my like, oh, there's issues with this movie section in terms of like what the actual plan is in this whole thing.
Like, how do you make money from a tunnel?
Right.
Well, that actually makes more sense than you think.
Yeah.
But tolls and taxes, like there's like very clear ways that you can make money on that one. But like, what is the legal plan for how that they're going to take ownership for this one? And how does just an individual make money from the tunnel? No, it's the corporation that financed it and like has the holdings of this whole thing. But yeah,
I kind of have like this headcanon that like Frank knows this whole time that they can't get it back, but he's so filled with PTSD from Vietnam and from watching these two people be murdered in front of him that he was supposed to protect, that like he actually just sets these two boys out on a revenge mission just to complete that, knowing that they could never actually gain access to this money again, but manipulating them for that because he just needs his revenge.
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel like that's the truth of it, because they never really resolve it. It's not like just bad guys die, which very satisfying end for the bad guys. Always great in Van Damme films. Really appreciate that. Big ups to him. But I would just say that, like, I think you're right, Case. I think that Chad should have been more militaristic, because I kind of feel like Frank is like in this for blood. He's in this for revenge. I mean, even the way that he manipulated them and the way he introduced them, like, it wasn't like, Chad, sit down, I need to tell you something. You had a brother blah blah blah. He just kind of like, I'm not really your uncle, and we're going to Hong Kong. And then he like basically lets him figure it out when they meet face to face, like in the most traumatizing, shocking way you could find out that you have a twin that looks just like you, who's involved in criminal enterprises on the other side of the world.
Well, and like again, no prep work whatsoever with this boy that you have in your possession for 25 years. Like, admittedly, like they start a like I guess his plan is we'll have a karate dojo, and that's how he'll know how to fight and be in shape, which is not the worst idea like as a front for it all, but like you know, it just is so strange that he didn't like raise the child with the knowledge of like your parents were murdered, we're gonna come back for you, we're gonna have this whole like Shakespearean kind of mashup of Hamlet with Twelfth Night kind of thing here. But
Fun
No, none of that.
fact, this was inspired by the Alexandre Dumas short story, The Corsican Brothers. So that was a story of two twin brothers who were conjoined, who were separated, but they still felt each other's pain and emotions. And that was what Jean Claude Van Damme, as a co-writer on this film, was inspired by in writing this film.
you know, that does make the very weird sex scene make a little more sense.
Yeah, but not much, and also gratuitous. Now, to be fair, I've mostly watched this film on TV, like broadcast television, so that has always been cut. Like I, so this is the first time that I've watched it where like the full sequence was on, and I was like, "Damn, this is long." Like I was like they basically let it go on as he drinks the entire bottle of cognac. Like I'm like, we get it. He's like drinking and imagining this. Like I understand, we get it, but it was like so intense.
Which was
I was
made
like,
all the
this
more
went on
intense
forever.
by watching it with my wife and my mother-in-law.
Ah, yes, that makes it weirder. Yes, because like I was watching it solo, and like first when like she shows up topless and is just sort of like there, I'm just like, oh, all right, gratuitous boob shot, because it was just sort of like out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden it was just like, well, we can't contrive a reason, even though we have a romantic couple that could at some point have had sex. Like we can't
Right.
contrive a reason for a sex scene to actually happen. So we're going to have them hallucinate or fantasize about a sex scene. And it is interesting that if they're feeling it, so he's feeling his brother being horny through their connection, makes it at least make more sense in this all. And like meanwhile, like the jealousy, like the drunk jealousy is permeating through him, so that's why he's like sort of like feeling it. But then she seems to be also in on it, because like there's like this it almost feels like it's like a psychic sexual three-way.
It's such a weird thing because like when they get there, it's almost like, oh no, it was just in his head. But there are implications while it's happening that it's all of them, because there's like sweat on Chad's brow as Alex is thinking about it. But then he kind of just like at the end, once the bottle is thrown, Chad looks totally normal. And you're like, oh wait, was that the three of them? Or was it just like what Alec imagined, like him sweating because of the thoughts, and then he went and did it. And I was like, there's something trippy here that I just don't even want to examine. It's just gonna leave it at face value.
Yep.
He got drunk, he was jealous, and they had sex near a clothesline on the boat. And that's it. Because there's a lot of like laundry hanging in at one point or another.
Oh yeah, the boat line or the clothesline on the boat is like there, and like she fantasizes about it, or Alex fantasizes about it, and she at least like has a moment where she's like, plays with the clothesline like flirtily or whatever, which led me to think that she also kind of pictured the sex scene. Like, I don't know. There's an episode of Entourage where like I forget the name of it, but like the two like identical twin comedians that were like popular in like the early 2000s were both playing agents like working for Ari Gold, and one's wife had an affair with the other, and Ari has this whole thing of like, what's the point? Like like why would you have an affair with like the identical twin brother of your spouse? And like there is an element of that here where it's like, why would you be jealous? Like what is she getting in the situation?
Yeah, no, I see that. Like, it's just there's just like supremely ridiculous moments that, but there are also like wonderful gems in this film. The fight scenes are great,
Mhm.
like all of them, and especially the final boss with the gangster Zhang, when they stick his hand inside the gears.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
that stunt work looks so good. Like, I was like, because it looks like it really went in, and it looks so good. Like, it's just
that I had a visceral reaction to that one.
I was like, oh. But it was so well done. Like, it really just like, and it holds up. Like, this is 1991. Like really. I think like out of all the twins in the same scene, you know, like when they're doing the the parent trap moments, I think the only one that didn't look that great to me was the one in the car where they're supposed to be sitting side by side and they do a side profile.
Oh
That
yeah,
one looked a little
and it's like,
awkward.
what are you talking about? We fucked up. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little awkward. But other than that, like, the effects were pretty decent actually, and
Yeah,
all the
compositing's
fight
pretty good.
choreography was really good. Even the artistic one with the spurs, even though it was very anticlimactic.
That was one of the fight. Well, but that was one of the fights I wanted to like shout out as being like a really cool like artistic scene
Yeah, it's very
of combat
artistic.
there. Yeah. And of course we have to like shout out Bolo Young as like the giant like bodyguard character for Zhang Moon, who is just huge. And
You can't even talk. He's so big.
no, he's dubbed like in this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just is wonderfully threatening, and it's nice seeing that sort of. I find it cool seeing big, strong Asian characters because it sort of breaks the stereotype of it like all being like quick martial artists, and I just think that that's like a fun like addition to this movie.
Yeah, I love when he in one, and I think it's in the final sequences of fights when he lifts that big drum, like, you know,
Yes.
like, and it's really heavy, and he just like throws it down on Van Damme, and he tries to like kind of just crush him with it, and his face is so perfect because he's got that crazy smile, maniacal thing going on that Bolo Young is so good at, and it just looks like he's having the best time, and I feel like that was like one of the conversations between him and Van Damme, being like, "Yeah, just crush me."
But that also gave me major Donkey Kong vibes, like early Donkey
did
Kong.
too, yeah.
Where it's like he's just chucking barrels. But Bolo Young in this movie was perfect to the point that I even said I don't think Griffith was needed as a bad guy. Like, this movie almost had too many bad guys, in my opinion.
Well, so I was thinking about that because I ended up enjoying that the movie settles on a dual main bad guy with dual dragons, or, you know, like dual enforcers for the dual main bad guys situation, so that we get a we're fighting the big bad enforcer, and then we're fighting the big bad for both of the brothers. But yes, it again, this movie feels like a video game because all of these are levels of a video game.
Yeah, and honestly, like at the end, each of the brothers gets one guy to like defeat. So that's kind of, I feel like Van Damme was like, but what will Chad do? Because Chad needs to beat someone. So I feel like it's like it is very appropriate that we've got like the two. Also, I kind of like that it added another level to their parents' death. Like, it wasn't just like the Chinese triad took them out, that it was actually someone who they had worked with, the banker they had worked with, to basically like betray them. And I also liked it because it wasn't just like, here are these good white people that were destroyed by evil Chinese triad. Adding that white guy in there was kind of like a little buffer for me in terms of like, oh no, this was like a financial decision, right? Business is business, gangsters do business, bankers do business, and these are just two people who turned on another person in their business deal. So I actually did like it. And Griffin's perfect. I mean, like, honestly, the fact that he like decided to show up to make sure the job got done made him a little more despicable to me than like if he had just like been on. I know it's just an easier way for us to like confirm that he was behind it, but it does make him more despicable to me. He betrayed his partner and showed up to make sure he was dead with the gangster.
Yeah, but that does bring up that this
Men like that
movie
don't like to get their hands dirty.
is so straightforward, and it's so straightforward
So
for
straightforward.
how long it is, because it is a long movie for
It is a
what's
long
going.
movie.
Yeah,
It could have been shorter.
but everything is just the most convenient way of addressing it all, where it's just like it, like, yes, Griffith is there when Frank shows up to save the day, and has already failed the parents, but gets away with baby Chad, like, and spots Griffith at the same time, and so and like hobbles away wounded. Then when they come to Hong Kong and they like go to the mahjong bar, like, immediately people like hand off money because they just know Chad, or they know Alex, and so and they see Chad, and like just every like step of the way the movie is just very like on the nose for all the details of it, which again just makes it surprising that with this a movie that completely lacks subtlety, that it takes so long to get through it all. So again, there are complaints I have with this movie, but again, I overall found myself really enjoying it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a fun movie.
Yeah. Just from a broad standpoint, thank you for prompting me to actually watch it. Again, I was like always one where like I knew the logline, but I probably wasn't gonna do a deep dive on Jean Claude Van Damme movies. So now, in the age of like not having movies just on Sunday afternoon on like USA or something, like I probably was just never gonna watch it.
Yeah. And with so much media happening already, like it's hard to be like, I'm gonna sit down and watch this movie from the 1990s,
Right?
that I never watched before.
Yeah, so why don't we be negative for a minute here? Things we didn't like. Adam, go. You brought this.
Okay, so this movie was like an 110-minute version of Jean Claude Van Damme being homophobic to himself, and
Oh yes, a lot of F
Yes.
slurs.
Yes.
and apparently the worst thing you could do as a man is wear black silk underwear.
That and have sex with a woman, because that also earned him the F slur, which didn't actually happen. Like, he imagined his brother having sex with his girlfriend, and then he called him the F word. And I was like, I think there's different words for that, but that doesn't fall in that category, bro.
And then with that, I have to say, one of the things I've always loved about this movie, but at the same time I always thought it was a detractor, Jean Claude Van Damme thought this was the movie that was going to make him appeal to more than just action audiences.
Yeah.
He thought this was he thought Chad was going to be his break into like starting to do comedy. He actually went on record in an interview saying, "No, Chad shows the softer side of my personality more than me. I don't just kick people. I dance. I have fun. I can be silly." And that there's an actual interview of him saying all of that. But as far as what is bad in this movie, it's just one, very whitewashed.
Yes.
And I say this as the whitest guy in the world. I glow in the dark.
I don't know. I'm also on this call.
Yeah. But
I've met both of you. Adam is whiter. I can.
yeah. So for example, the girlfriend was actually originally supposed to be played by Tia Carrera.
Oh, okay.
Ah.
And I just to make the cast a little less white, I think that would have been a very interesting casting. But again, this is where Jean Claude Van Damme had creative control. He insisted on Iona Shaw, I think it is.
Was it or Alana Shaw? I don't know. Not the point. But yes, who played Danielle. That makes a lot of sense because it was one of those situations like when we looked at The Grudge where it was just like weird that all the main cast were like white people.
Mm. Mm. And
Yeah.
then even though it was so fun, like getting into it, everyone recognizes Chad as Alex. I was like, when his girlfriend walks in and is like, "You're completely different," and then just starts like getting all up in his business with no questions asked. I'm like, that for me, I was like, you would think, hey, he's never dressed like this a day in his life. This isn't his personality. Maybe let's ask a question.
Right. It only works not even because they're twins, but because it is the same actor playing the parts. On that note, how much, how much is the twin thing really necessary to this whole movie? Like, it has a few spots where it like comes up, but like, could this have been two like actual brothers instead of the same actors, or does it like?
And take away Van Damme's right to play both roles and have a double credit for his double impact in this movie? Do you think this movie would have been made if he could not have the double impact he wanted to have?
No, if it only had the single impact, or if it had him actually share the impact, split
Right.
impacts.
I don't think it would have been made.
No, certainly wouldn't have been made.
I'm
just musing about it as an element of it. I think the compositing is done well.
You could make a brother movie like that's just brothers for sure, because you could have the babies be at different ages, right? You could have one around like 2.5 and like one that's 1 or something like that. So you could have that, but I don't think that Mr. Jean Claude Van Damme would have allowed that, because I think that he really thought, as Adam said before, that this was him proving his versatility by playing these two roles. And, he wasn't going to let anyone else be Chad, and no one else could be Alex because he was cool.
Yeah, no, I'm not, this is not me speculating on what could have been done differently at the time of production phase of it. It's just me sort of like musing aloud about the story necessity of it all. I mean, obviously we have the whole thing where like Zhang like picks up Chad thinking that he's Alex, but there's not that much of it. Like, I assumed going into this movie that there were going to be more hijinks, and it's pretty clear early on that it doesn't really matter too much to the story. Like,
well, you'd miss the club hijinks too, because that's the second time too with the cognac.
That's true. Yeah.
So like one of them delivers the cognac, and Alex delivers the cognac first, and then Chad decides to deliver a whole other box, but he keeps walking around with it into the dining room, and he just kind of messes everything up because he's Chad. And he's funny. He's the funny half of the twins. And so like, haha.
Van Damme, that guy's funny.
He trips upstairs while holding Louis Vuitton luggage. He's like a comic genius.
I laugh too hard at Van Damme. That guy's funny. But yeah, it's definitely. Could this have been done with like, imagine Stallone and Russell doing a Tango and Cash, but double impact? It could have happened, but I think like Sam was saying, you missed some of the funnier scenes for it.
Yeah. Again, it was just me sort of like musing about that. And like, it certainly is a gimmick to draw people in, and it's well executed. Like we said, aside from a couple of spots where the compositing is not great, like I think the bigger issue, because they get the timing really well in terms of the acting against each other component, but it comes off very stilted. And maybe this is just, it's 1991 and not everyone's used to acting against blue screens yet. And so, like, Van Damme is just like at the wrong time on top of just, acting in a language that isn't his first language and, doing all this. Like, but he's he's not the best actor. That's all I'm saying.
There are some things that come off very awkward. Like I remember like early on in the movie, it's like the scene after like Frank is telling them all about their parents and stuff like that. And there's just like this really kind of odd exchange between the two brothers where like one of them's like, where Chad is like, yeah, I'm gonna do it no matter what. And Alex is like, you don't know this place, you don't know this life, which is like so true, so granted, right? Because like, and then like Chad just says like one more thing about like being in, and then Alex is just like, well, we have to go somewhere. And it's like so weird because I'm like, wait, so do you agree? Like like the conversation didn't really go anywhere, and it felt like it was like a weird cuts that like they like it was just like these two, like is this the script, like is this the script on paper, like did they match these lines up, or they're just like, we just got to get out of this room and like onto a boat with cars, let's go
Yeah.
go.
Get it to the point where we can have opposing cuts.
Right.
I feel like that could have just been explained to like, well, if you're going to try to be a part of this, here's an audition, get on my boat, as
Right.
opposed to just cutting.
Yeah. So some clunky bits there for sure. Obviously, like we've addressed it's the awkward how they just wrote around Van Damme's accent for both of these.
I still kind of love it. So like it's so terrible, but it's so good at the same time, because
yeah,
the writers
it's so bad it's
like,
good. You're
the writers are like, oh, are you going to question this? We put in an answer. You're welcome. And I kind of love it that the writers, like, every time, too, because there was one other time Greg had a question, like, he asked it out loud, and the very next scene, they were like, someone came up and just gave exposition for it, and he was like, oh, okay.
That's awesome.
But I'll also say, at least they explained it. How many times in like the 90s did we sit through a Schwarzenegger movie where he was just playing Jack Johnson from Minnesota with absolutely no explanation to why he had this thick Austrian accent? At least with Van Damme, they addressed it in a throwaway line, but they addressed
This is true. This is true.
That is also true.
Yeah.
It's very common in the 90s to not address most of those things. It was very good. You know, I was thinking, now that Adam has said about how Chad is the softer side of Van Damme, that maybe the reason why they decided, not just because, you know, this is an exercise in versatility, maybe the reason why Chad doesn't have the fire that Frank has is because Frank took such good care of him, right? He says, I took care of you like my son, that he's supposed to be like the sheltered one, while Alex is not, because he like grew up as an orphan on the mean streets of Hong Kong. Like the thing is that like we don't really get a lot of like what Alex has been through, or like how he kind of got to run his own small time like crime ring, because
Yeah.
it's basically like what it is, and it feels kind of strange. Like they kind of just like jump in to his world and then pull him into like this revenge plot, and we don't really get to know, like we know because of throwaway lines that like Chad was raised in France and then they moved to LA to open the dojo and aerobic studio. And so we know that much, and we know that we can tell that he's had like a fairly like sheltered, very well supported life. He's very easy to judge, easy to trust, right? Like someone walks up to you with money, like I mean, like I wouldn't take that money. And like when she walked up to him and she was like, follow me, I was like, oh, hell no. I would not be following a strange person into a back room anywhere, especially in a foreign country. Who the hell do you think I am?
Yeah.
But Alex is the kind of person who would follow someone.
Or Chad is, yeah.
Especially if they're Chad, rather. Chad is the kind of person who would follow someone into a back room, especially if they were a beautiful woman. Like, that's an automatic trap for me. And he doesn't realize that. And I don't know if Alex would have. Like, Alex is like definitely a person who's more suspicious, which is true because he's jealous that his brother is possibly sleeping with his girlfriend. So yeah, I don't know. So maybe that was the implication there, that he's just more sheltered and pampered, and Frank decided to leave him that way because he's his precious boy.
Well, but that's the thing, Frank.
That he then takes to a fight.
Yeah, like Frank feels like this gets back to my whole thing where it feels like Frank and Alex should have been the pair that actually had been together and like were like living together in Hong Kong, dealing with like the mean streets or some shit like that, and like Chad got sent off to like live in France, like and
Yeah, he got shipped off by those nuns.
exactly, like because then you understand why he's the way he is, and just thank God he's in shape. Obviously because they have to use the same actor and whatnot. Like, and they didn't,
Right.
So they're like, oh yeah, he's in shape because he's a because he's a karate instructor and personal trainer, which makes enough sense. That's all fine, and it allows for them to have like the differences in fighting styles where like where Chad is more of like a precise karate fighter, like he does like a lot of kicks and like allows like Van Damme to show off the splits in a way that like it wouldn't make sense for Alex to do so because he's supposed to be a down and dirty kind of street fighter.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you could rework the film. I just thought of something. I actually just thought of something that would make this beginning feel a little more and give him like, but maybe I'll save it for pitches
save it for
because
pitches.
It's probably better than the pitch that I actually have. I'm gonna save it. You just gave me a new pitch.
Putting a pen in there. We're
pin dropped.
Okay. But yeah, because like I like Frank. Like I guess the big thing I want to get at. Like I like Frank a lot as a character. Yeah. Like he's so fucking badass, both in that opening sequence and then like every time he's actually in a combat sequence. Like he is so effective all the time, and is just like friggin' cool. And then it's like Chad's the one you raised, like when Chad like is like worried about Danielle, like when she calls after being like felt up and like, oh yeah, that's another thing we haven't talked about in this movie, which is like the amount of like rape implications that are in here.
So many. Oh my gosh. And Greg and I were talking about it. There's a lot of like stuff, especially in this particular era of like action films, Hong Kong like karate films and things like that, martial arts films, where like very strong women are incredibly sexually aggressive to other women. And that definitely happened in this film with Gareth's security henchmen. She was incredibly aggressive with our female lead, and a lot of it was sexual. And in fact, at one point when she really felt her up, afterwards, she stays in the room and they show her like savoring it, like getting off on the fact that she just like violated this poor young woman and like felt her up. And it's strange.
Yep, icky.
What the fuck was going on in the 90s?
Yeah. That is an area that we should address. And then there's another spot where Danielle is being, when they're being held hostage later in the movie, where like a guard is like going to go like sexually assault her while they're being imprisoned, and that's when Alex shows up to like defend her honor. But man, like
he also slaps her.
Yep. Also that,
poor
yeah.
Danielle.
Yeah, Danielle takes the brunt of it in this movie, which is an area that this is one of those spots that's like kind of weird. In that regard, it's probably good that it was not a minority woman playing the part, because that would be even worse.
Kind of. Yeah. I could see that.
But
so that it wasn't just yeah, the visuals even worse on that.
Yeah,
for sure. Especially the slap and the shoving her in the water and the disregarding
and the
her feelings and
yeah. It would be worse if it was slightly more. Yeah,
the white man was just for sure.
And it's all bad. It's just to be clear, it's all bad.
It's still bad. It's still bad to Danielle the way that she stands now, not cast, just a blonde lady. But like, for sure.
Anywho, yeah, so that's a problem.
Sitting with that a little bit.
Moving on from that, but I do want to, again, like I do very much like Frank, and I feel like his relationship with Alex like is an interesting one. Like when they actually are together, they bond very much because they speak the same practical language with each other. So like when Danielle is like abducted and like or rather Danielle is like felt up and Chad goes to like recover her, he or like Alex and Frank were off like working together, and like it sort of like made sense that they were like doing their like prep work and shit like that. But that relationship would make so much more sense with the person or with the child that Frank raised.
Yeah.
That would make more sense, but because it also felt like, in my opinion, watching it, that the relationship flipped at some point. Like Frank just started being frustrated with Chad, and then with Alex, he was like, "You're the son I've always wanted, but I raised this one."
Sure. Yeah. Again, like it's just like it's a lot going on there with when this movie's already like. I don't know. It's not. It doesn't add to the complexity of the movie. It more just sort of feels like a weird head scratching kind of change from like what would be the logical approach.
Yeah. I agree. Especially because I do feel like there is that flip where he is closer to Alex later in the movie, and he's more frustrated with Chad.
Yeah, I mean, like Chad gets the appropriate like response to like finding out that Frank is dead. Now, when they fake Frank's death, I should say. So like he, the relationship there is treated appropriately. It just seems that like the vibe, it makes more sense between Frank and Alex. And that vibe doesn't make sense with Chad is the thing. Like Chad again just doesn't feel like he's been prepared in any sort of meaningful way, in a way that doesn't make sense for Frank, and it sucks because I like Frank.
Yeah,
but damn,
especially because as close as he seemed with the parents, you would think at some point he would have just sat down and been like, "You know how I'm your uncle Frank? Let me tell you about
about your parents. Yeah,
your father. Let me tell you."
Yeah, because he wasted 25 years.
Realistically,
for sure. He just waited,
And it felt like, if you go back to the beginning of the movie, it felt like he waited until someone was able to bring him a picture of Chad as an adult and was like, "Oh, Chad's doing things. I guess we can go handle this now." I mean, Alex. Excuse
of
me.
Alex, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I kind of want to take our break now and then come back and then sort of like...
Wait. One last thing.
Oh, sure.
Can we just talk about the impeccable dresser that is Gangster Zhang? Because that man was rocking ascots, and I just this is not really important to the whole thing, because like honestly I just want to give him a shout out because we talked about Griffith, but I want to talk about him and how he looked wonderful always. I love his cane sword. I always love a cane sword. Well, it was more of a cane knife, but I love a good accessory that is also a weapon. Beautiful. I also really love that when they invaded the compound, he showed up in like it was kind of like a explorer like camo thing, but he was wearing an ascot, and I was just like, ooh, always looking fresh, love it. And then as soon as they got back to the boat, because they had kidnapped Frank and Danielle, like literally it was like moments later and he stepped out in a whole new suit. Like that was my adventure suit, and this is my now we got our hostages suit, and I'm back on the boat. Like this is my on the yacht boat. And I just really appreciate that about that character and his fine fashion sense. I just wanted to say that because I loved that about him and his wardrobe.
He served looks, I'll give you that.
The whole movie.
Yeah, that does. There's a spot when it's like, "Do you know who Raymond Zhang is?" And it's like that's like asking a New Yorker if they knew who Donald Trump is. And I was like, "Ugh."
Oh,
that hit weird.
Yeah.
Anywho, yeah. So why don't we take our break and then stumble through our fixes for this movie, because this is a fun movie. So we'll see what we got. Do you have a comic book you just can't stop thinking about? One that stuck with you years later? On Trade School, guest hosts get the mic to talk about a graphic novel that changed the way they see the world, or just made them fall in love with comics all over again. In just 5 to 15 minutes, you'll hear stories about the stories that real people love the most. Trade School, a short-form ongoing series about the comic book trade paperbacks we love and why we love them. Find it wherever you get your podcasts. And we're back. All right, so Adam, here's the deal. I am not allowed to go before Sam. It's the only major rule on this one. We try to keep things realistic. We try to respect the movie that actually came out while at the same time trying to be additive to the whole process. We try not to just complain for the sake of complaining. But the only actual rule is that I can't go before Sam. So as our guest, you can decide, do you want to go first or do you want Sam to go first? I just can't go before Sam. So
I will always defer to Sam because,
Sure.
Suck it out, Sam.
I'm gonna scare you.
Feel the impact. Feel the double impact.
For sure, I feel it. Okay, so this is a little bit on the fly because I feel like I just thought of this and let's see if it works.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I think what we do is we do switch it up. So the beginning starts the same with the cold opening, the murder, the opening of the tunnel, all that stuff, and the twins getting carried away, one by the nanny, and of course, one by Frank, who we love. The only difference is when the nanny drops the baby off, you're going to see her hand a piece of paper, like a little handwritten note, to the nun. Okay? And then she's going to disappear. And then you're going to see Frank with the baby, and he's going to be on a boat. Okay? So what I've decided is Frank is not going to go back to the US. Frank is actually going to sail off, and he's going to live on one of the many islands near to Hong Kong, and he is going to take Alec with him. But we don't know that. We open on a karate instructor in France, in Paris, who has been raised by nuns, who does charity work, who has this one letter, who's turned 25, and he's decided that he is going to go to Hong Kong, which he knows that he was born in, to find out about his birth family, because he knows from the letter that he has a family and that they asked him to leave Hong Kong because it was dangerous. And that's why the nuns sent him away to their sister orphanage in France.
That works.
And so even though the nun is begging him not to go, he decides that he has to go to Hong Kong to find out what happened to his family, because he wants to know. And if there's half a chance that his brother is alive, he wants to go.
There's wordplay here somewhere where it's like, I know, sister, but I might have a brother.
Right. Exactly. I love it. So that's really great, because now we have reasons for the reason why he is so sheltered. Now, we can learn in this too that he really excelled in martial arts, and that actually he's such a good guy. He actually comes back to the orphanage where he was raised. This is how he has the conversation with Mother Superior, to teach the young kids karate. We know that he's really good. We know that he's amazing. We know that he's a nice person. We know that he grew up very kind. So he goes to Hong Kong, and at this point, what has happened is that Frank and Alec have been living off the grid basically for a long time in a smaller island, or one of the many islands, maybe even Taiwan, who knows, honing their skills. But they have come back, and they have come back in the last 5-6 years, enough to establish themselves in Hong Kong and kind of build this underground network with this whole revenge plot, because that is all Frank has been in his noggin, to take over and to get revenge for these people who he dearly loved. He really loved these people that he was protecting, and that's why he's raised their son to be the kind of person who can help them take it down. And then the cog in their plan is that frickin' Chad shows up. He shows up and they're like, they've worked out this whole thing where like, you know, they're kind of in it, they're not in it. Zhang is suspicious of them because they're back. Maybe Griffin never even saw them see him. Like Frank just saw them and then like runs. So Griffin doesn't know that he knows, but they're still very suspicious because they're working in on their territory, right? And so they go to pick up Alex, but who they pick up is Chad. And like Alex and Frank see this and they decide to save him because he's got the same freaking face. And who is this guy? And that's how they meet each other. Double impact. And then they pull him in to get revenge. And since he's the Karate Kid, all they have to do is teach him how to shoot stuff. And then you got a movie. And I would cut the gratuitous sex scene because honestly, it just takes too long. And I wouldn't necessarily get rid of like Danielle's character altogether because you do kind of need her to like confirm some stuff, but I may actually switch it so that like she's someone that like Daniel meets along the way kind of thing, and they have like, oh, not Daniel, sorry, she's Danielle. See, I'm bad with names. That Chad meets along the way that like decides to help him kind of do the research and kind of make her less of a more important character and kind of just someone who like gives some stuff in, because I do think like at the end of the day, like she doesn't need to be as involved. Like I don't understand why they had her pull they pulled her into the fight just to push her into a corner. She like never did she come over and like bop someone on the head or anything like that. They should have had her just go and take care of Frank instead of like pulling her into the big shipping yard. So I think in general she can still be kidnapped because she got involved, but like I just think that like she's not already like a girlfriend. Maybe she's someone that like very kind Chad meets and she decides to help him because he's very confused. And I think like we can leave it at that. And that's how I'd flip it. And no drunken thing. But all the fight scenes stay the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna say
amazing.
Because like the double scotch bottle fight scene that occurs, like that needs to stay. Like I was super here for like I was here in general for like the cognac smuggling kind of
that was funny. Yeah,
recurring joke. And I just because like of my day job working in the wine and spirits industry, and like the when he was like took 2 bottles of scotch and broke them to use them to stab people, I was like, yes. Again, this is the Double Dragon movie that like I actually always wanted. Like there were so many things that were like this I could have seen this in Final Fight or Streets of Rage. Like this is great. I'm so here for it. In fact, right after I watched this movie, we took my daughter down to see her grandparents, and it's like a 45-minute drive each way, and my wife drove, and so I was in the passenger seat, and I've got a little game emulator thing, and I played Super Double Dragon my entire ride down, and I was like really feeling that it was like, oh yeah, this is the exact same thing. Like
like you were headcanoning, this is Chad, this is Alex,
exactly.
we're going.
Yeah. Billy and Jimmy Lee are just like Chad and Alex right there, and it works. It works wonderfully. Like Bolo is a Bobo.
Oh my god, my goodness.
So one, I don't know how to follow Sam's pitch.
we can just build on this because like I don't have like much.
It can also be collaborative. Yeah. Like so, if you want to build on what I like just said, because like there is some like at the end that could be retooled, or you can just say some stuff and then we can like build something new.
So like, because if I can throw this out there as just a build on in terms of the Danielle component of it, which is that if Danielle was Chad's girlfriend and still had the job working for Griffith, and like maybe the reason why they go to Hong Kong is for her work, but he's like excited because it's like, I was born in Hong Kong, like.
Yeah, I've never known.
Like I've always wanted to go there. Like I've never, and we established this is a work transfer for her, and that's the reason why he comes along and like establishes like a connection with Griffith, who maybe doesn't realize that he's the son of like the people he had murdered.
Oh, I like that.
Like that allows for Danielle to still be a relevant, to still have a prominent female character in this movie, because this movie is severely lacking in that department, while flipping the relationship and making it so that it works in a different way. And then this way, like Chad could be
Yeah.
the one who's like possessive of her, and like it, it gets worried about it when Alex shows up, who is this sort of like scoundrel version of himself.
Right. Yeah.
See that, because one of my pitches when I was thinking about it was actually commit to the love triangle that they spend so much time trying to build, instead of it kind of feeling like, why is he so jealous when nothing has actually happened in so many senses? Like, commit to it. Chad is kinder. Chad is nicer. Chad is so like, she's seeing, here's everything I'm attracted to from where I'm in love with Alex, but in a not a douche
Right.
rapping kind of a thing. And so like that was one of my things, was where it felt like they wanted to go there but didn't. I felt like they could have went there, where it was like, especially with the ending being Chad kind of just passing her to Alex and then like giving like the okay hand sign, like
That end was so weird, actually.
yeah, like I felt like that could have definitely been like they could have actually went there and like played with dynamics between them, played more, but then that would have added more time to this movie, and that's the one thing.
Right, that is the problem here, which is like what can we do to like trim off time is also like a high priority here.
My other idea, and I think it fits collaboratively with Sam's, and it also fits into just trying to make this a better movie. Do more Parent Trappy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do more stuff where Chad has to interact with Alex's world. Come up with a reason that Alex has to interact with Chad's world. There's a Kumite the next town over or something, you know. And Chad was the coach, so Alex ends up being caught up in that, and then he's just sitting there like, someone's like, Coach, why are you so gruff? Why are you so forward? And he's just like, kick him in the face. Like,
yeah, well, you know, and this works even better if if Chad is actually known to Griffith. You know, if like
Right.
if they're in that scenario where Danielle works for Griffith and Chad is dating Danielle instead of Alex, and then Alex is imitating Chad and is thus close to Griffith, and thus we can sort of have a reversed version of then when Chad is close to Zhang in place of Alex scene. Yeah, that then works. It wouldn't necessarily be like a karate tournament necessarily, or maybe it could be actually, where it's just like, I'm participating in a karate. I'm trying to do a French accent here.
a Belgian French accent.
You sounded more Arnold than you did.
But I give you points for trying.
Anyway, so like maybe he says that he is participating in one, or thus like Griffith shows up with Danielle, and it's actually Alex who's there, who's been training his whole life to murder this man by his uncle Frank.
Yeah.
He has to hold it back.
Murder.
So I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Because while I was watching this movie with my wife, she was like, "This is the Parent Trap for dude."
Oh yeah.
And I was like, and I was like, I wish they would have leaned into that a little bit more, like had a few more switcheroos where that did involve Chad just getting pummeled in the face for not being Alex.
Although that said, those kind of scenes are often the ones that like make me personally feel uncomfortable. Like those kind of mistaken identity scenes often I squirm a lot when those scenes are happening. So I did appreciate that there were not that many, but I agree with you that this movie should have had more.
I think in general though, like there was a little like, it's interesting because even though we're saying, oh, I wish there was more times where like it had gone the other way and Alec was in Chad's world, but I actually feel like Alec's world is kind of still a little bit superficial. to the actual mission, like yeah, we get the bar and stuff like that, but like I don't know, like it's so focused on like the brothers and Frank that I don't know if I ever really really fully feel, oh my God, I don't know if I ever fully feel like I am actually in Alex's world completely, if you know what I mean. Like there's like moments, but it just I think like we just never quite get that unless it's just a gag. So I don't know. It's one of those weird things about this film.
It's kind of like we peek in, but we never actually go inside. We stand at
Yeah.
the doorway for a lot of it.
But it's so long, so we really don't have time to look further in.
Yeah, we spend too much
Maybe if we
time.
cut some of that sex scene.
Or like the whole thing.
The whole thing, it's so long too. Like it didn't really need to go on that long. Like it's like at least like 5 to 6 minutes of like back and forth of him like drinking another swig and then like sexual shots, then another drink, and then sexual shots, and it escalates every time as the bottle drains. It was so agonizing and long, and I guess French.
Maybe that's the detail that we're missing. Like that's just
Yeah.
It's like, but contractually, I have to have a sex scene. Like,
Yeah, just
I'm
the
better.
sweat is being well, it's not just that, it's the pain from the sex, the imagined sex.
That does feel very Van Damme, though, to be like, I'm required to have a sex scene.
Yeah.
And it's required to be 8 minutes
Right.
long.
Well, then how about we trim down some other scenes? Like the Mercedes smuggling scene is insufferably long. Like that could have been trimmed
So long.
a bit.
So
Like
long.
that took a good chunk of time.
I do like that they pushed it into the water and made it blowed up because explosions. But also it's such a long scene. It takes too long to get there.
I don't feel like we needed the exposition in that scene of like, oh, they don't sell these kinds of cars here. It could have just been, here's the shot of the contraband in the trunk. Here's the cops. Oh crap.
Yeah, for sure.
And you've cut out like 2 minutes of that scene alone just by getting rid of the exposition in the scene.
Yeah, I'm like,
what we're saying is this is a perfect.
Go on. I'm sorry.
I was saying so, but what we're saying is overall, this is a perfect movie. Like,
it's not perfect, but I would say this is a surprisingly good movie, and it's one that I think that like, man, this would have been great with DVDs back when you could like skip chapters.
Yeah.
Because if you could skip to the middle of the Mercedes heist or Mercedes like deal gone awry kind of bit, like, and then skip from there, like past like them setting up their base, just like skip like chunks, but not, you know, but only like 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, kind of. This would be so great. So I guess that's like honestly the pitch, which is watch this on DVD so you can do chapter skips.
Yeah. And honestly, if you haven't seen this film and it comes on TV, if you happen to still have television, you should just leave it on. Like leave it on. They're already going to edit the things that we probably think need editing, and you're not going to get a lot of the F-bombs because it's, I watched this on network television, so I didn't know that he used the gay slur as often as he did, because it was
really
aggressively, really aggressively, like hard F. I didn't know until I saw it like on Tubi, and I was like, oh, that was full chest, like wow. But like, it's probably going to be edited out. It's probably not going to be there, and the sex scene is definitely not going to be there because I definitely don't remember it when it was playing on Channel 11 when I was younger. So yeah, go ahead and like just watch this movie, because without those things, it's pretty good. And like, if you're just doing chores around your house, I swear to gosh, there's some really like rad fight scenes in here and some really nice artistic things going on, some good effects.
I love the Sam Alisea if you're doing chores around your house, rating for movies. Like
This is a great one.
I fully envision it, but I just realize, like, yeah.
Yeah, like some movies don't even deserve that. Like some movies are like, no, turn that off, don't watch that. But this is like a really great because like in between like what you're doing, you're gonna get like an amazing fight scene. You stop, you watch it, you're like, oh, that was amazing. And then you can go on with like sweeping the floor, folding the laundry. This is a great movie for that. This is a great movie. And there will be moments where it will interrupt your housework because you will have to stop because a man with spurs is throwing some of the most beautiful kicks you have ever seen in a black background with just minimal sound so you can just hear the sound of his spurs. Guys, it's transformative. You need to watch this movie.
I knew I was coming in positive, but I love how positive that we all are for this movie. Adam, thank you for bringing this movie.
Of course.
This gift to us.
And to think, Sam, in the last few weeks, you've accused me of being obsessed with Jean Claude Van Damme.
Well, you were. You watched this movie several times. I watched it once. How many times did you watch it, Adam?
I watched this movie, counting today, because I watched it right before we got on 4 times.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's too many
that's
times.
dedication. that is some octuple impact right there.
Yeah, a lot of impact.
But thank you for bringing this. I did really enjoy this. Like I said, while it's so close to a Double Dragon movie, and it's so much better than the actual Double Dragon movie that is just astounding. Very much enjoyed it. It's definitely going into my rotation of like the like B movies, and like solidly a B movie, but like B movie for action purposes. I'm rather happy to have watched it. So on that note, where can people find you and follow you?
You can find me on almost any social media platform at Not That Adam, just because I grew up in church, and so every week for like my whole life, people have come up to me and made Adam and Eve jokes. So I'm Not That Adam. You can find me on Twitch also at Not That Adam. I DM D&D. I play in a campaign. So follow me on Twitch. Follow me on socials.
All right, yeah, everyone should find you and follow you, and check out all the stuff that you've got going on. And I'm definitely going to check out your Twitch stuff.
I look forward to it.
Cool. Sam, where can people find and follow you?
They can find me here, of course, on Another Pass, and also on our app episodes where we take another pass at Another Pass. And then occasionally when I remember our Discord exists, I sometimes pop up there to lurk and see what people are saying, and occasionally like their comment. And then other than that, I am busy looking for my double somewhere in the world so that we can make an impact. Because I'm pretty sure that if I met another me that looked exactly like me, we would be just too powerful and ready for revenge at any time. And so that is a long, long search and well deserved in this world. And so I will be too busy. But if you have any complaints at all, you can find Case at.
Well, since you stole the double joke, you can find me. You can find me on most social media platforms at Case Aiken. The one I'm pushing these days, especially, is Blue Sky. So find me there at Case Aiken. The bsky.social or whatever the chain is. But if you just search for Case Aiken, you'll find me. The Discord server is a great place to find me, and I remember that it exists and visit there frequently, multiple times a day. I'm mostly lurking because
very responsible.
But I do love to chime in and join in the conversations that are going on there. So it is a wonderful time. I highly recommend checking out our Discord server, which you can find links to at our website, certainpov.com, where you can also find all kinds of great shows. today I'm going to shout out Books That Burn, which is just a fantastic show that really looks at the trauma that characters in novels experience from the perspective of them being rational actors that are being tortured by the authors. And so it's just a fantastic series, and I highly recommend it. And yeah, otherwise circle back here and check out what we've got next. Sam, what have we got up next time?
Next time, we'll be talking about Highlander 2, The Quickening. But until then, if you enjoyed this, pass it on.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Another Pass is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Sam Alicea and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Sophia Ricciardi. Our logo and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our intro theme is by Vin Macri, and our outro theme is by Matt Brogan.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.